Hello, today's video is going to be about infamous witch trials in Scotland, and I have 5 cases to speak about, and I'm just going to give you a rundown of each of them and then go into more detail. So, in Scotland there was a time when fear and hatred of magic and its practitioners reached such fever pitch that hundreds of men and women were hunted down and made to suffer for alleged crimes of witchcraft. So the first witch we're going to look at is Bessie Dunlop of Ayrshire. In 1576, 13 years after the Witchcraft Act was passed in Scotland, Bessie Dunlop was a married woman, the wife of Andrew Jack from Linen, Ayrshire, when she was arrested due to her long-standing reputation as a healer. Bessie also had a skill for helping people find stolen goods and was charged with the using of sorcery, witchcraft and incantation with innovation of spiritus of the devil. A jury found Bessie guilty of all charges against her and she was condemned to death. Now this was the one I couldn't really find any more information on, just what I found on this site. So moving on. The North Berwick Witches. The North Berwick witch trial was one of the first mass witch trials to take place in Scotland, and the case quickly achieved notoriety? Like notorious? In the charges against the witches, there was a notion that the persons involved had been taking part in ceremonies in which the devil was said to have appeared. In 1950, King James V was informed that in North Berwick, a fishing port on the east coast of Scotland, a coven of witches had been working against the king, trying to cause his death through sorcery. Many of the accused suffered terrible tortures at the hands of interrogators, and many gave detailed confessions, including Agnes, who admitted she was a witch and guilty of treacherous and devilish deeds. During the reign of King James V, somewhere between 70 and 200 so-called witches were put on a trial, tortured and even executed from the town of North Berwick and the surrounding area alone. The exact number is not known, and neither is the proportion of those arrested who were actually executed. However, the consensus is that the large majority were horrifically tortured. The reason for this was King James. James V was travelling to Denmark to collect his new bride Anne of Denmark in 1589. During the crossing, the storms were so severe that he was forced to turn back. James became convinced that this was the work of the witches from North Berwick, intent on his ruin. There was talk at the time that one of them had sailed into the Firth of the Forth on a sieve to summon the storm, this duly proving her guilt as not only a witch but also as a would-be regicide. Scotland itself saw about 4,000 people burned alive at the stake for witchcraft, an enormous number relative to its size and population. Something else that is remarkable about the North Berwick witch trials were the bizarre nature of the accusations and the despicable forms of torture used to extract confessions from the victims. There was a church on the green where the witches were said to hold their covens, dance and summon the devil. This was St Andrew's Kirk, situated on the seafront. It would have been a perfect place from which to summon storms. In fact, there were rumours that some of the witches were held, tortured and eventually tried on the grounds of the kirk, the foundation of which exists even today. Although not recorded, it is generally accepted that many victims died of their injuries that were inflicted upon them during torture. Some of the implements of torture that were used at the time included the breast ripper, a device that did exactly as it sounds. Oh my god. It consists of 4-pronged levers that would encase the breast of the accused witch and then tear it from her chest with a considerable amount of trauma. Another device that was used on witches, either already tried or awaiting trial, was the skull's bridle, a metal device that fits round the head that had metal protrusions that would slide into the victim's mouth, making it impossible to talk. Sometimes men would use these devices on errant wives who nagged them too often, but they were often used on witches. The next one I have is Margaret Barclay of Irvine. Margaret Barclay was married to Archibald Dean, a respected citizen of Irvine. She was known for her fiery temper. After a quarrel erupted between Margaret and her in-laws in 1618 over an alleged theft, Margaret was accused of cursing her sister-in-law, Janet Dean. Margaret was later said to have cursed a cargo boat owned by her brother-in-law, John Dean. When the boat was recorded as lost at sea, with John on board, Margaret was arrested on suspicion of witchcraft. The trial of Margaret Barclay resulted in an antagonising death of Isabel Lynch, an elderly woman, Van John Stewart, beautiful young mother, Margaret Barclay, and Isabel Crawford, who was in the full bloom of youth. They were accused of being involved in a satanic plot that was widely believed to have caused the Irvine vessel, the gift of God, to be wrecked on the coast of Cornwall, causing most of the local crew, including Provost Andrew Tran, to perish. Margaret Barclay was a spirited, high-tempered young woman who steadfastly denied all devilish practices made against her. The most incriminating evidence the Justice Court had against her was that she carried a piece of rowan tree and a coloured thread to make, as she said, her cow to give milk when it failed. What? To overcome her resolve in the inquiry proposed a method of gentle torture. This would take into account her age and sex. This tender torment consisted of placing Margaret's legs in the stocks and loading her bare shins with iron bars until she acknowledged her guilt. The weights were removed only when she promised the Inquisition that she would tell them what they wanted to hear. On her last day in court she implored, "All I have confessed was an agony of torture, and before God, all I have spoken is false and untrue." After sentence was passed, she was immediately taken to the place of execution outside the old burgh boundary known as Springfield. Having made many expressions of religion and repentance, the poor soul met the fate in most convicted witches in Scotland by being strangled at the stake, then having her body burned to ashes. So that's what I have for Margaret Barclay. Agnes Finnie. She was a trader in Edinburgh, a fishwife from Potter Row, with a sharp tongue and a foul temper. Me. Spiteful in the extreme, she was also the victim of terrible spite of others, and when she was tried for witchcraft in 1642, there was no shortage of people to come forward to testify. As argument followed argument and customers and neighbours fell prey to more misfortunes, rumours were spreading fast about Agnes Finnie, and over time, with the help of unfortunate coincidence, she managed to dig a hole for herself so deep that she could not hope to get out. Agnes was found guilty of witchcraft and executed on Castle Hill. It is documented that on one occasion while on his way home, the young son of Mr. William Fairley passed Agnes in the street and promptly called out Agnes Winnie, an impromptu nickname he would very soon regret. Agnes publicly cursed him, and within 24 hours he had completely lost the use of his left side and became bedridden with so incurable a disease that his family knew he was dying. 1 week later, he was dead, with medical physicians describing the cause of something supernatural. The young boy was not the only neighbour of Agnes Finnie to suffer her wrath. Beatrix Nesbit has annoyed Agnes in some way, and so was given the most fearful disease in which she lost the use of her tongue, never able to utter another word. Beatrix was fairly lucky, however, in that she escaped with her life, unlike poor Janet Grinton. Janet was a fishwife and had sold Agnes 2 herrings which, upon eating, Agnes has decided were unfresh, and so went to demand her money back. Janet, in failing to return Agnes the 8 pennies she had paid, seemingly sealed her own fate. Agnes screamed at Janet that she would never eat another thing in this world. Sure enough, the fishwife died that very day before another crumb could pass her lips. As with most people accused of witchcraft at this time, it was common belief that Agnes had made a pact with the devil and had regular audiences with him. One piece of evidence that suggested she was engaging in acts of devilry was recorded following a visit Agnes made to the son of Mr. John Buchanan. Mr. Buchanan's son had cerebral palsy, and desperate for a cure, his parents called for Agnes to visit him, which she did. After a few moments in the room with the sick child, Agnes asked his parents to leave the room to go and pray for him. When they returned, they found their son so ill that he could not move any part of his body. As they held him and tried to help him move, his mother screamed out in horror. What they discovered was a large wound about the size of a hand on his right buttock. As if a chunk of flesh had been literally torn away, the child died within a week. Agnes, however, had not finished with this family. The child's mother, Bessie Curie, and Agnes got into some kind of heated dispute over the changing of a sixpence. Agnes, who was not happy with how the argument was going, threatened to summon the devil to come and take a bite out of her, as he had done her son. At this point, Mr. Buchanan came onto the scene. and of course supported his wife, thus incurring Agnes's wrath. He called her a witch and threatened to throw her over the nearby staircase unless she ceased upsetting his grieving wife. With that, Agnes simply walked away. That night, however, he became very ill indeed with a fever, but he was a strong man, and by the next day he seemed to slightly recover. He visited Agnes to tell her that unless she lifted the evil from his body, he would tell the whole town how ill she had made him. In an instant he felt better, but it would not be for long. Some time later, Mr. Buchanan entered into yet another argument with Agnes. Agnes had refused to give Mrs. Curry a cake on credit. Agnes demanded that they leave her premises immediately and uttered that, as his birth had clearly been caused by a witch, then so too would his death. Immediately upon returning home, he contracted a long and grievous sickness, whereof he was like to melt away in sweating. It will come as no surprise to readers by this point that soon after Mr. Buchanan died. Finally, after 28 years, locals held a meeting and declared that enough was enough. On December 11, 1644, Agnes was tried and convicted of being in continual society and company of the devil, and condemned to be hung outside Edinburgh Castle and then burned at the stake. In one final statement, Agnes confessed that she often consulted with the devil and that she was a rank witch, a term used to describe a witch who is noble, proud and powerful. And the last one I'm going to speak about is the witches of Bo'ness. In 1679, when witch fever was showing signs of dying down in other parts of Scotland, one of the last multiple trials to take place for witchcraft sent 6 people from the area of Bo'ness to their deaths. At a time when charges of witchcraft were becoming gradually less frequent and were being treated with greater skepticism than they might have been before, this case was all the more horrifying for the fact that those who were charged and executed had comparatively little charged against them in the way of malefice. Malefice? The charges against them mostly concerned what appears to have been drunken behaviour. They were also said to have made a demonic pact. In addition, it was said that the women had indulged in intercourse with the devil, and that on several occasions over a period of years that the accused, 5 women and 1 man, had drunk large quantities of ale in the devil's company. The accused were Annabel Thompson, Margaret Pringle, Bessie Vicker, William Craw, and 2 women with the same name, Margaret Hamilton. On December 23rd, 1679, all 6 were led to the Corby Hill, to the west of Bo'ness, where they were all strangled at the stake and burnt to ashes. Yep, that's all I have on that. So I hope you enjoyed this video on Scottish witches. That really interests me as well. I was so interested reading that, and I'm always being interested in witches and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.